Hi there! Ever found it complicated to find common interests in people? The thing that you two share that makes everything easier when you're meeting someone? Well, I've always found that quite difficult, and today we are going to talk about just that. How do you discover an interest that you share with someone else? Thank you for coming back to my channel again. My name is Alice and I'm a communications coach and an online educator. And this is one of my favorite topics, always about people first. It makes everything so much easier when you can have people that you can trust and people who are just awesome to be around with, and comes down to the common interest that you guys share. So let's get started. Ever heard the phrase, that person was just amazing and we got along so well, we had so much in common? And have you ever stopped and thought about what brings you guys together? What is that commonality? The easiest way to find that is common activities that you share, playing sports together, common interests. Maybe you have been to the same place on vacation. When you find those common interests, it is actually the building block for forging the strong relationship. And this is why today's video is super important, to identify what those commonalities are. First, let's talk about where you can discover common ground. When you're at a party or you're on vacation and you're even in the workplace. Let's take the context of work. And let's say you were in the office. You come up to someone and you go, hey, how was your weekend? Or you say, do you want to grab a cup of coffee with me and we'll grab a salad for lunch? And now you two are in this space together, and sometimes it's really awkward when you meet someone and you're just like, hey, how's the coffee? How's the salad? I always look at it as this beautiful present moment that you have with that person to say, I really like this cup of coffee. I just love coffee. And that person probably is going to say, I love coffee, I hate coffee. And then you're talking about do you like Starbucks? Or you talk about brands. And then all of a sudden you break the ice, meaning you have a lot easier time communicating because you're talking about that one specific thing called coffee. Now, once you kind of had that commonality around coffee, you may switch into how's work? Do you like the boss? How do you like your colleague? And then you start talking about work. And then next thing you know, you talking about the weekend, what you have planned. Maybe you reveal that you're in a relationship. I think a lot of us are very afraid to disclose personal information about ourselves because it might be used against us, because we are afraid that it may jeopardize our job. And sometimes we think that our colleagues are out to compete us and they may be sabotaging our relationship or our job. And so we're almost closed. We keep the personal information to ourselves. But remember, guys, you put everything out there on social media. In reality, if somebody really wanted to understand your interests, they'll go on Facebook, they'll go on Instagram. And so really there's nothing to hide. I don't think you have to disclose everything, but I found it relaxing just to talk about your favorite sports team or coffee, date night spot. Maybe you like to hang out at this one restaurant with your family and just keep it very light. And I think that's a beautiful way to connect with someone. One of my favorite phrases when somebody realizes that they have a lot in common with you because you connect on multiple interests, they say, wow, we have a lot of things in common. We are not as different as I thought we were. I remember when some colleagues were very intimidated by me because I was very confident in what I did. And then I would walk in and really happy and excited to be there. Well, I always try to put that attention away from me and just focus on the interest that binds us together. Because remember, when you have a common interest, it really locks that relationship. It binds it together. It's your common ground. It is that foundation that you use to build a house. Because what's a house without the first floor? If you're running your own business, especially this is important, and even if you're working for someone else, the common interest is a topic that you start with from any kind of business dinner, negotiations, conversations with your boss. You really start off the conversation by saying, how did your weekend go? How do you liking the work so far? Because the work is your common ground. It kind of relaxes people. So think of common interests as a way to relax you, as a way for you to feel more comfortable around the person. And this is extremely important because without the common interest, it's really awkward to have that conversation, because you're not just going to say, hi, how are you? Or awkwardly stand there with coffee or say, hey, how's the weather? I know with women, for example, if I want to find common ground with a woman, I always mention how like beautiful her hair looks or the type of shoes she's wearing. She's ordering coffee. I say, what kind of coffee did you get? Or if there's something on her desk in the workforce, I say, oh, this is a picture of your family. How many kids do you have? Of course, I don't have kids, but like I still want to know about her kids because the pictures are beautiful. And I always talk about my brother and how close I am with him. And it really just brings a smile on someone's face. And then when we smile, there's like a dopamine hit that we get and we're relaxed. And then we can begin to trust someone and we could begin to have an easier conversation. So I really do believe that the key to establishing a deeper connection and a meaningful conversation does start with the common interest. Now that we've talked about why common interest is important, let's talk about the mechanics of actually finding out those common interests. I know I've touched a little bit about asking questions. There's a few things that I summarized for you, which I'll reveal in this video, so please stay with me till the end, that gets you to understand the common interests very quickly and also easier without sounding awkward. First is asking open-ended questions. It is that question that leads someone to explain something. It's not a yes, no answer. So for example, if you say, are you cold? The person will say yes, no. Or do you like this sports team? Do you like this job? Yes, no. The better way to ask is, how do you find this job? If you could have your dream job, what would it be? And I know people get very uncomfortable with open-ended questions because they have to think instead of going to work and being on autopilot. When we have to think, it's also uncomfortable because maybe we're hiding something. We just want to go into work, do our job, and go home. So for example, a good open-ended question is, what kind of music do you like? What did you do this weekend? What aspects of this job do you love? What's your favorite restaurant? And you actually may hear me talk a lot about open-ended questions and building a deeper connection. So please check out my playlist for more episodes on communication. Next, the second most important way to discover common interest is look for cues. Look at their environment. Look at their body language. When you ask questions and when you talk about something, do their eyes light up? Do they smile? And if you talk about a sports team and then they smile, you ask like, I see you smiling. Do you also like that sports team? So really pay attention to body language. Pay attention what's on their desk, what's in their environment. Those will give you clues into what people are interested in. The third important way to uncover common interest is sharing about yourself. I know this is weird because either we love to talk about ourselves or we really don't like the attention on ourselves. When you find yourself in this awkward situation and people are not talking in the room, and it's this awkward silence, start talking about yourself, what you did this weekend. Start talking about what your plans are later. Hey, after work, I'm thinking about going to yoga class. Are you coming? Do you like yoga? Or what do you like to do after work? And if you don't want to ask those questions, just talk about yourself. Like, after work, I'm going to a gym class. Would you like to join me? Or for lunch, I'm grabbing a cup of coffee. Would you like to join me? It kind of feels weird, but I promise you, like when you talk about your interests, what you love, there's going to be a moment where that person is going to say, I love it too. And this is my favorite part about finding common interest. It is exploring with the person, going to the gym together, going to dinner together, going on a team building exercise. Doing these activities together, you learn quickly what kind of interest you both share. And it's the easiest thing to do because sometimes you don't even have to talk. You just do the activity and you can learn very quickly based on the person's reaction what they love. So I'm going to share with you a story from Valencia, Spain, on how I discovered a common interest that I shared with a woman whom I would have never imagined talking to. And as a matter of fact, she was one of the only few people in the room sitting by herself, and she was very grumpy. Her facial expression was not friendly at all. She was frowning. And I said, let me give this as an opportunity to come up to her and find out what she likes. So of course I started speaking Spanish, which is already uncomfortable for me, but I knew that I needed to practice Spanish, and I wanted to also communicate with someone who was sitting by themselves, because let's be honest, we sometimes don't like to sit by ourselves. Unless we're avoiding people, then we like to do it. I started talking to her. She gave me a cold shoulder. She switched to English because my Spanish wasn't the best. And then we were speaking English, a little bit of Spanish. I asked her, can we please practice Spanish? I would like to practice Spanish. So we were talking, and then I asked her, how do you like the event? And she said, it's okay. Where do you live? I live in Valencia. I didn't ask her, what do you do? Because in Europe, it's not that common when you first meet someone to ask them, and what do you do? And we were talking, and then about 30 minutes into the conversation, which didn't lead to anything, and whenever I try to ask open-ended questions, she didn't respond. And if I try to make a joke or talked about myself, she would not. And I just said, God, this woman is like, her whole body is just stiff and she's just not letting anybody in. She finally asked me what I did, and I told her I was a writer. And she went, oh my God, I'm a writer too, and I'm working on this novel. So we started talking about the novel, and then we talked about books, and we found out that we loved similar books. And it took me an hour to find common ground, but actually it was one of the most interesting conversations because she was very much educated, a lot of different topics of philosophy and politics, and we talked about women's rights, and it was just a very meaningful conversation. So don't pressure yourself to find the common ground, and give yourself grace and time and patience to discover it in someone. Not everybody is open, and I know in America we're very open and we tell everybody everything and we're very direct. But in other cultures, especially in Spain, it's very conservative, so people tread lightly. They really keep their interests close to their hearts. The beauty of finding common interests is that it not only allows you to connect deeper, as I've mentioned before, but it will also show you new information or new perspective or new worldviews that you have not considered. Because we can sit there and just be in our head. The more people we meet, the more our worldview and perspective expands. I've traveled to about 40 countries and I lived in 6, and I know that with each person that I meet, my world just expands, and it's beautiful to discover new interests. I wanted to take a moment and ask you, how do you find a common interest with another person? And where is it easier for you? Is it easier to discover that at work, or at a party, at a networking event? And what kind of questions do you usually ask, or what kind of actions do you take that lead you to discovering that beautiful commonality that you share? I'd be curious to know. If you could write it down in the comments below, that'd be awesome. Another thing about finding common interests, I've mentioned perspectives and worldviews, but you discover passion. And passion is one of those things that when somebody opens your world to something new, you may or may not be passionate about it. You may actually discover that you've never thought that maybe an activity, let's say you go meet a surfer and you try surfing and you become so passionate about it that now you become a surfer. Or writing, let's say you've just never really written and then you take a class on creative writing, or you've had a conversation with an author and you start writing a book yourself or a short story and you go, oh my God, I love writing. So finding common interests leads you to new passions, and it's a beautiful thing. And lastly, those common interests become memories. You share those experiences and those are memories. I just recently was speaking to an investor, and he told me that in the last 20 years, people invest in experiences. People pay for experiences and activities rather than just things, material items. They're really spending a lot of money on just shared experiences. And guess what? Shared experiences comes from common interests. You share experiences with people that you find something in common with. Think about those moments and how beautiful they are, and you transform yourself, and that's just why we live. If you like this video, please hit the subscribe button, and for the next episode, I'll talk about one of my favorite topics, how to build relationships with strangers. As always, do the best that you can every day.